Hello, this is your host, Todd Lewis, the Prayers of Folly podcast. Tonight is the sixth and last installment of The Open Conspiracy by H.G. Wells, which will conclude our third of the four New World Order Technological Dictatorship series. Chapter 8, Progressive Development of the Activities of the Open Conspiracy into a World Control and Commonweal, the Hazards of the Attempt. We have now sketched out in the blueprints the methods by which the confused radicalism and constructive forces of the present time can, and probably will be drawn together about a core of modernized religious feeling into one great, multifarious creative effort. The way has been shown by which this effort may be developed from a mere propagandist campaign and a merely restrained protest against contemporary militarism into an organized foreshadowing and research, publicity, and experiment in educational, economic, and political reconstructions of that Pax Mundi which has become already the tantalizing desire of great multitudes throughout the world. These foreshadowings and reconstructions will ignore and transcend the political boundaries of today. They will continually become more substantial as project passes into attempt and performance. In phase after phase and at point after point, therefore, the open conspiracy will come to grips with the powers that sustain these boundaries. And it will not be merely topographical boundaries that we will be past. The open conspiracy will also be dissolving and repudiating many existing restrictions upon conduct and many social prejudices. The open conspiracy proposes to end and shows how an end may be put to that huge substratum of underdeveloped, undereducated, subjugated, exploited, and frustrated lives upon which such civilization as the world has known hitherto has rested, and upon which most of our social systems still rest. Whenever possible, the open conspiracy will advance by illumination and persuasion, but it has to advance. And even from the outset, where it is not allowed to illuminate and persuade, it must fight. Its first fights will probably be for the rights to spread its system of ideas plainly and clearly throughout the world. There is, I suppose, a flavor of treason about the assumption that any established government is provisional, and a quality of immortality in any criticism of accepted moral standards. Still more is this proposal made even in times of peace, to resist war levies and conscription and offense against absolute conceptions of loyalty. But the ampler wisdom of the modern Atlantic communities, already touched by premonitions of change and futurity, have continually enlarged the common liberties of thought for some generations, and that it is doubtful if there will be any serious resistance to the dissemination of these views and the early organization of the open conspiracy in any of the English-speaking communities or throughout the British Empire, in the Scandinavian countries, or in such liberal-minded countries as Holland, Switzerland, and Republican Germany, or France. France, in the hasty years after the war, submitted to some repressive legislation against the discussion of birth control or hostile criticism of the militarist attitude. But such a check upon mental freedom is altogether contrary to the clear and open quality of the French mind. In practice, it has already been effectively repudiated by such writers as Victor Margaret, and it is unlikely that there will be any effective suppression of the opening phases of the open conspiracy in France. This gives us a large portion of their existing civilized world in which men's minds may be readjusted to the idea that their existing governments are in the position of trustees for the greater government of the coming age. Throughout these communities, it is conceivable that the structural lines of the world community may be materialized and established with only minor struggles. Local boycotts, vigorous public controversies, normal legislative obstruction, social pressure, and overt political activities. Police, jail, expulsions, and so forth, let alone outlawry and warfare, may scarcely be brought into the struggle upon the high civilized level of the Atlantic communities. But where they are brought in, the open conspiracy, to the best of its ability and the full extent of its resources, must become a fighting force and organize itself upon restrained lines. Non-resistance, the restriction of the activities to moral suasion, is no part of the program of the open conspiracy. In the face of unscrupulous opposition, creative ideas must become aggressive, must define their enemies and attack them. By its own organizations or through the police and military strength of governments amenable to its ideas, the movement is bound to find itself fighting for open roads, open frontiers, freedom of speech, and the realities of peace in regions of oppression. The open conspiracy rests upon a disrespect for nationality, and there is no reason why it should tolerate noxious or obstructive governments because they hold their own in this or that patch of human territory. It lies within the power of the Atlantic communities to impose peace upon the world and secure unimpeded movement and free speech from end to end of the earth. This is a fact on which the open conspiracy must exist. English-speaking states, France, Germany, Holland, Switzerland, the Scandinavian countries, and Russia, given only a not very extravagant frankness of understanding between them, and a common disposition towards the ideas of the open conspiracy, cease to arm each other and still exert enough strength to impose disarmament and respect for human freedom in every corner of the planet. It is fantastic pedantry to wait for the whole world to accede before all the world is pacified and policed. The most inconsistent factor in the liberal and radical thought of today is its prejudice against the interference of highly developed modern states in the affairs of less stable and less advanced regions. This is denounced as imperialism and regarded as criminal. It may have been assumed grotesque and dangerous forms under the now decaying traditions of national competition, but as the merger of the Atlantic states proceeds, the possibility and necessity of bringing areas of misgovernment and disorder under world control is increased. A greater war like the War of 1914-1918 may never happen again. The common sense of mankind may suffice to avert it. But there is still much actual warfare before mankind on the frontiers everywhere against brigands, against ancient loyalties and traditions, which will become at last no better than excuses for brigandage and obstructive exaction. All the way to the open conspiracy will be on the side of the world order and against the sort of local independence which holds back its subject people from the citizenship of the world. But in this broad prospect of far-reaching political amalgamations under the impulse of the open conspiracy lurk 1,000 antagonisms and adverse chances, like the unsuspected gullies and ravines and thickets in a wide and distant landscape. We know not what unexpected chasms may presently be discovered. The open conspirator may realize that he is one of an advancing and victorious force and still find himself outnumbered and outfought in his own particular corner of the battlefield. No one can yet estimate the possible strength of reaction against world unification. No one can foresee the extent of the divisions and the confusions that might arise among ourselves. The idea in this book may spread without any serious resistance in most civilized countries, but there are still governments under which the persistent expression of such thoughts will be dealt with as crimes and bring men and women to prison, torment, and death. Nevertheless, they must be expressed. While the open conspiracy is no more than discussion, it may spread unopposed because it is disregarded. As mainly passive resistance to militarism, it may still be tolerable. But as its knowledge and experience accumulate, and its organization becomes more effective and aggressive as it begins to lay hands upon education, upon social habits, upon business developments, as it proceeds to take over the organization of the community, it will marshal not only its own forces, but its enemies. A complex of interests will find themselves restrained and threatened by it, and it may easily evoke that most dangerous of human mass feelings, fear. In ways quite unpredictable, it may raise a storm against itself beyond our present imaginings. Our conception of an almost bloodless domination of the Atlantic communities may be merely the confident dream of a thinker whose thoughts have yet to be squarely challenged. We may not even be sure of the common peace. Across the path of mankind, the storm of another great war may break, bringing with it for a time more brutal repressions and vaster injuries even than its predecessor. The scaffoldings and work sheds of the open conspiracy may fare violently in that tornado. The restoration of progress may seem an almost hopeless struggle. It is no part of modern religion to incur needless hardship or to go out of the way to seek martyrdom. If we can do our work easily and happily, so it should be done. But the work is not to be shirked because it cannot be done easily and happily. The vision of a world peace and liberated for an unending growth of knowledge and power is worth every danger of the way. And since in this age of confusion we must live imperfectly and anyhow die, we may as well suffer, if need be, and die for a great end as for none. Never has the translation of vision into realities been easily since the beginning of human effort. The establishment of the world community will surely exact a price, and who can tell what that price may be in toil, suffering, and blood. Chapter 9, Human Life in the Coming World Community. The new life that the open conspiracy struggles to achieve through us for our race is first a life of liberations. The oppression of incessant toil can surely be lifted from everyone, and the miseries due to a great multitude of infections and disorders of nutrition and growth cease to be part of the human experience. Few people are perfectly healthy nowadays, except for brief periods of happiness, but the elation of physical well-being will someday be the common lot of mankind. And not only from all natural evils will man largely be free, he will not be left without his soul tangled, haunted by monstrous and irrational fears and a prey to malicious impulse. From his birth he will breathe sweetness and generosity and use his mind and hands cleanly and exactly. He will feel better, will better, think better, see, taste, and hear better than men do now. His undersoul will no longer be a mutinous cavern of ill-treated suppressions and impulses repressed without understanding. All these releases are plainly possible for him. They pass out of his tormented desire now. They elude and mock him because change, confusion, and squalor rule his life. All the gifts of destiny are overlaid and lost to him. He must still suspect and fear. No one of us is yet as clear and free and happy within himself as most men will someday be. But before mankind lies the prospect not only of health but of magnanimity. Within the peace and freedom of the open conspiracy is winning for us all these good things that escape us now may be ensured. A graver humanity, stronger, more lovely, longer lived, will learn and develop the ever-enlarging possibilities of its destiny. For the first time, the full beauty of this world will be revealed to its unhurried eyes. Its thoughts will be to our thoughts as the thoughts of a man to the troubled mental experimenting of a child. And all the best of us will be living on that ampler life, as the child and the things that tried, and learnt still live in the man. When we were children, we could not think or feel as we think and feel today, but today we can peer back and still recall something of the ignorances and guesses and wild hopes of these nigh-forgotten years. And so mankind, ourselves still be living, but depressed and reconstructed again in the future, will recall with affection and understanding the desperate wishes and troubled efforts of our present state. How far can we anticipate the habitations and ways, the usages and adventures, the mighty employments, the ever-increasing knowledge and power of these days to come? No more than a child with its scribbling paper and its box of bricks can picture or model the understanding of its adult years. Our battle is with the cruelties and frustrations, stupid, heavy, and hateful things from which we shall escape at last. Less like victors conquering a world than like sleepers awaking from a nightmare in the dawn. From any dream, however dismal and horrible, one can escape by realizing that it is a dream, by saying, I will awake. The open conspiracy is the awakening of mankind from a nightmare, an infantile nightmare of the struggle for existence and the inevitability of war. The light of day thrusts between our eyelids and the multitudinous sounds of morning clamor in our ears. A time will come when men will sit with history before them or with some old newspaper before them and ask incredulously, was there ever such a world? Right? That's a short one today. We have now finished the open conspiracy. So let's see who we have in the chat. Well, Hashima Wan and Mass Creation Broadcasts. Hello. All right, everyone. Tune in next week for my beginning of the reading of H.G. Wells's The New World Order, which is the final and fourth installment of the Technological Dictatorship series. This is Todd Lewis of the Praise of Folly podcast, signing off.